Hey guys, just near JHart Modelworks coming to you with another tool review, and it is another airbrush review, but trust me when I tell you that this is a whole different class of airbrush. We're going to be taking a look at the Harder and Steenbeck 2024 Infinity CR Plus 2-in-1. This is an awesome brush. Now, this is not a sponsored review, paid for out of pocket with my own money. This was paid for with funds completely from the sales on the Colts 3D page. So those of you guys who have been buying my files, I appreciate you guys very much. You guys rock, you're awesome, and you're responsible for me being able to do this review. So let's go ahead and get to it. Alright, now before we get into the review on the brush itself, I'm sure there's at least someone out there who's asking them questions. You know, you reviewed a Gaahleri airbrush, you're affiliated with Gaahleri, does this mean that Mobius airbrush was not as good as you said it was? Were you just schlepping for those sweet Gaahleri dollars? You know, questions like that. So let's go ahead and knock those out real quick. As far as the sweet Gaahleri dollars, I have earned $24.22 whole cents on my commissions from the Gaahleri sales on the link down below. There's also a discount code for 10% off. There's other guys out there who are constantly promoting. They promote every product, they review every product. I'm sure those guys are probably making much better money, but I'm not one of them. This is not a sales and promotions channel. I do tool reviews on things that I find useful in the hobby that I think you guys might appreciate as well and may or may not know about or may want some more info about. I'm not here to sell things. Now, for the quality of the Gaahleri Mobius 3 airbrush, that brush is a fantastic brush, especially at that price range. Like I said in the review, that is a $70 airbrush that keeps up with my $120 to $150 Badger brushes all day long. It is a fantastic brush. If you are a high-end portrait airbrusher or something of that nature, like a high-end artist, you're going to disagree with me on that statement, and rightfully so, because that brush does not fit for your application. I review things within the application of scale model car building. I have said for years, and I still stand by it, that you do not need a Iwata Custom Micron, you do not need a Harder and Steenbeck Infinity, you do not need a high-end airbrush to build model cars. I sprayed for years with the $20 Master airbrush that came with my compressor. That thing has worked like a champ. I actually have 3 of them. They still use them from time to time for doing things like, there's a technique where you put talcum powder into your paint to get a textured paint effect. I don't want to put something like that through a really nice brush. Those cheap little Master airbrushes all day long will do that work. For building model cars, we don't do super fine detail. Now, there are exceptions. There are those guys who are painting murals on the side of their cars, you know, doing the ghost flames and stuff like that. The really nice lowrider paint jobs where they've got all those little silver lines and that they've got like fades all around and all that. Those guys would definitely benefit from this brush. This brush would be amazing for something like that. But for just spraying down paint onto a model car body or doing interior paint, this is a luxury product. Absolutely. Completely agree. But I have some things coming up. If you were like a plane builder and you want to do like shading all those panel lines like they do, or they do like this weathered effect on modern jets where they black base the whole airplane and then they come in and put like these little white dots all over all the panels, then come over it with their gray or whatnot, and it gives it like a worn, weathered look to it. This would be the type of brush you would want for something like that. Tank guys doing some shading and stuff like that. Camouflage, this would be a great brush for camouflage. But model cars, just laying down some, you know, pearl paint over, you know, a black base, something like that. All day long, a cheap airbrush is absolutely the right tool for the job. So with all of that out of the way, we're going to go ahead and flip this around and start taking a look at this work of art in a plastic box. All right, guys, here it is, the Harder and Steenbeck Infinity 2024. Now, I got the 2-in-1, which means that I get the 0.25 millimeter needle and nozzle, which comes in it, as well as the 0.44 millimeter needle and nozzle setup. So there is our box. The sleeve slides off, and you get this nice protective case. When you open it up, you get this little card. So someone at the factory, when they built my brush, they did some squigglies, did some fine detail work, they did some shading down here at the bottom as a test. This came out of my brush. So when you get your brush, there may be like the tiniest hint of paint down in there or something. Usually not, because these guys are meticulous about everything. But if it is there, it's just because somebody tested out your brush. So you get your airbrush, and it comes with a little cap on it. You get the really, really small cup for the paint cups. There is another tip. There's a smaller paint guard tip to replace the one that comes on it. I'm not entirely certain what this thing is for at all. There's an airplane flying overhead. I do live right next to an airport. And you have the larger paint cup. So this is probably what you're going to use if you're wanting to paint like a full body with this. You're going to want a larger cup. Then down here, you get your 0.4 millimeter needle and the nozzle setup to come with it. And it comes with another spray cap tip. This is the 0.4 millimeter nozzle, and there's something about these that I want to point out that is just super, super cool. Harder and Steenbeck marks the size. So there are 4 little rings on the needle to tell you that this is the 0.44 millimeter needle. There are 4 little rings on the nozzle, so you know that this is the 0.44 millimeter nozzle. I got the 0.2 millimeter setup for my Omni 4000. It was the UMP Apex when I bought it. They do not tell you what size anything is. If you put the 0.3 millimeter needle into the 0.2 millimeter nozzle, it will break the nozzle and stretch out the brass tip on that nozzle and just completely ruin it, which is immediately what I did the first time I set it up. Similarly, there are only 2 rings on the 0.2. Just like on the nozzle, there's only 2 rings on the nozzle itself, so you know which one is which easily just by looking at it. That, in my opinion, is super, super cool. Your paint cup screws off. And honestly, there is no play in this paint cup at all. This brush, they are really proud about toolless maintenance on the brush. Everything just pressure fits into place. So when you want, I don't want to take that out until I have the needle out. We'll look at that here in a second. So you do have a limiter. So when that limiter is in place, you can only pull it back however much you set it. So you can actually set your limit to however you want it. Say you're using a really, really hot paint, like zero paints, and you want to make absolutely certain that you can't put too much paint down on your body and craze the plastic. You can set the limiter just by pushing this little button in. And then when you want it out, you simply pull on this back end and it completely resets. So you can just pop in and out as you need without having to sit there and dial it in, then dial it back out, and it's just go. Everything about this brush, everything is a work of art. It is an absolutely beautiful brush. The top of the trigger, the actuator in there, the way it pushes everything, just everything about this brush is absolutely gorgeous. So we're going to release our chuck, and when you pull your needle out, the way they have built the needle chuck, it is tapered. So no matter how you put this needle in, at what angle you put this needle in, it's going to slide that needle into the correct position, into place, without hanging things up, without damaging the tip. It just guides everything in. So, I mean, look at that needle chuck. The needle chuck is beautiful. This is where you go to set the tension on your trigger action. So if you really want a nice stiff trigger, I don't. You can just dial this way in and you have a nice, just really, really stiff trigger. If you dial this way back out like I tend to do, this trigger is just going to flow back. Just super sweet, no resistance at all. I like mine like right on the very edge. Just like, it's absolutely super smooth. So even the actual needle chuck is beautiful. So there's a trigger mechanism. So as you're pivoting it back, it moves this. This hits this, and that's what actually pushes your needle back. In the old Infinity, there was a bit of slop between the actuator and the actual chuck, and it would result in there being a small gap before you started getting paint. A lot of guys didn't like that, and so there was a fix. DreadFX found a fix for it, was to put some of the washers, some of the nozzle washers, into place over the chuck in the Infinity, in the old Infinity, and that solved that slop. But there's absolutely no slop in this at all. It is beautiful. Now that we have the needle out, we'll go ahead and mess with this front end. So it just slides right off, your little fan cap there. There's our nozzle. As you can see, there's only 2 rings because this is the 0.2. So that's the nozzle cap. So that tells you that that's the 0.2 nozzle cap because you've got your 2 rings. There's your nozzle with your 2 rings on the nozzle. These nozzles, this is the very first airbrush in the world to use titanium for the nozzle. Most airbrushes use brass. It is very soft. You push your needle in too hard and the tip of the needle will split, it'll crack, and you won't get smooth paint flow. Paint won't flow properly. Paint will flow out of the brush when it's not, supposed to, when you're not pulling back on the trigger. If you do a lot of airbrushing where you're spraying for hours and whatnot, my understanding is that this textured tip can sometimes be a little much, especially when you're constantly pressing and it's got a firm pressure in there. However, you can come in and remove the quick release. And there is a Phillips slot head screwdriver set in there. Just take a small slot head screwdriver. You can back that out a little bit, and that will release the tension on the spring in here, and that will give you a softer press on the trigger. I like a little firmer press for air, but a really smooth pullback, so that's how I've got mine set up. Out of the factory, you will get it'll be firm. It'll be a nice firm press down for air, and they're a bit firm on their trigger. I like to be considerably softer. That's just the way I am. Now, I have been playing with this brush. I have used it a little bit towards the end on the Super Bee build that I just wrapped up. And I have only used the 0.25 millimeter tip on here, and oh my god, it is fantastic. It does not like a heavy metallic. So if you're spraying something with a lot of flake to it, probably not going to be the setup you're going to want is not going to be the 2.5. You're probably going to want the 0.44 for that. I will be testing that when I do my buddy build with Mike. My intention is to use this brush entirely, start to finish, primer to clear. The entire build is just going to be done using this airbrush to get a real good feel for how this brush is going to work in, the full setup with the 0.44 and the 2.5 as I need it. I can swap them back and forth if I need to, but that's going to be the plan for really testing this brush with that 0.44. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to take this into the booth, and I'm going to play with this for a little bit with the 0.25 and just kind of show you a little bit about this brush, just spraying this brush with just some standard like black paint or something, and just to see some of the really fine, beautiful detail that you can do with it. All right, guys, here we are in the booth. We got some Tamiya LP5 semi-gloss black that's cut 50/50. It's either Tamiya lacquer thinner with retarder or Mr. Leveling thinner. I don't remember which. Compressor is set for 20 psi. We are set up with the 0.25 millimeter needle setup. Got just some white styrene sheet here. So just like you were spraying a body, got nice, smooth, even pigment. I'm gonna come in a little closer. You can get some nice darker shading in here. Very smooth, very consistent. That is really, really nice. You can get just about like right up in here. Now, if you want to get even closer, what you can do is you can come in here and we're going to add some more thinner. I'm going to add some Mr. Leveling thinner in here. I would say probably we're going to end up being about 2 parts thinner to 1 part paint. So with this crown cap, if you're an acrylic guy and you're getting tip dry, lacquer guys won't deal with tip dry pretty much, but for acrylic guys, you'll have that problem. You can take a Q-tip, just moisten it in your thinner of choice and just come in here and just brush that needle. And you have full access to the needle with these crown caps. Fantastic. All right, so we've got our paint. It's thinned down a little bit more. We are ready to spray. We've got the air compressor turned down to about 10 psi. This is about where I would spray Alclads, by the way, is about 10 psi. And you can get right up there. I mean, those are just tiny. Like, you can really get some really fine detail in there. So that is the 0.25 millimeter needle setup. Absolutely fantastic. Super great for detail work. Nice smooth fade up here. I mean, this is just an amazing brush. It's so smooth. The trigger action is fantastic. All right, guys, so we are back with the 0.44 millimeter needle and nozzle setup. We are back up to 20 PSI. We're gonna flip this over to the other side. Now, I've never sprayed with the 0.44 setup, so I do not know how this is going to go. That is incredibly smooth. All right, so the 0.4 millimeter needle setup is definitely the setup that I would be using for spraying like a full body. If you're wanting to spray anything at all with a heavy metallic, something like a candy base coat, you know, Orion Silver, Galaxy Gray from House of Colors, you know, anything that's going to have a significant size flake to it, you're definitely going to want to use this. Now, I did spray the super metallics from Mr. Hobby's super metallic line. I did the duraluminum, the chrome, the steel. They all spray perfectly fine in the 0.25. I did add a little bit, like a couple of drops extra thinner to them just for my own peace of mind, but they work fantastic. The 0.25 needle is really, really good, and I'm really liking this 0.4 as well. All right, guys, so that is a wrap on the review for the Harder and Steenbeck Infinity 2024. Everything about this airbrush is absolutely fantastic. The spray pattern is just buttery smooth. The aeration of paint is fantastic. It uses very little paint compared to my Badgers. I went through a lot less paint during this review. Everything about it is beautiful. It's like holding a piece of art while making art. Cannot say enough good things, but again, like I said, this is absolutely a luxury product, not a necessity for the hobby. Now, I did grab it, and there's reasons why I grabbed it. There are going to be some changes coming to the channel starting next year. It's not going to be all model cars. I have some things in the works. Charlie Mack said in one of his videos, get out there and do something different, and I plan to do that next year. I have at least one plane in the mix. There's a bike that's going to be in the mix as well. So I wanted something that could get in there and do some of that, like marbling pattern, you know, the panel line shading, stuff like that. And the detailed needle and nozzle setup on this is going to really be my main focus for this. I am, however, going to leave this currently in the 0.44 setup with the large color cup on it, and that is because I'm fixing to start my buddy build with Mike from Mike's Miniature Motors. If videos come out the way they're supposed to, this should come out this Saturday. The Model Cars and Coffee finale on the Super B is going to come out Sunday. Next week will be the unboxing for the Alpha models Ferrari Monza SP2 that we're doing with Mike. And my plan, like I think I said earlier, is to use this brush end to end for that entire build. So thanks for hanging out with me and checking out the airbrush, guys. I always appreciate you watching the videos, and I will catch you guys on the next one.